So let's say you're like me, you play Duel Links but you don't have enough time sometimes to kind of grind the game out, you don't really know the decks in the meta other than probably knowing what the best 2 decks are, then like new boxes with cards that you don't know about, and you still want to get to King of Games because you want the 200 gems. Well, I've got the perfect deck, so this deck is a deck that I have been playing ever since it got the new support, which is Ancient Gear, and the deck list that you see in front of you is pretty much the exact same deck list that I have been playing for half a year, and the only things I've changed are like the flex spots in the extra deck. So other than that, pretty much this deck has worked for me for the past like half a year or something, like ever since the new stuff came out. So the reason why Ancient Gears is such a zero brain cell deck that you can bring to ladder and win games with is because this deck has a trait which lets them basically not interact with anything your opponent is doing. So no matter what your opponent is playing, what you do is pretty much exactly the same in every game. So you have to kind of like react to what your opponent is playing, you don't have to know what their cards do, you don't have to like negate their stuff or interrupt what they are doing. All you do if you go first is you set up a guy that's unaffected, you search a Kiteroid, and then you just pass, and then you let your opponent play. You let them set up whatever they want, and you just completely allow them to do anything that they want to do, and then during your turn, you just deploy your fortresses, and then just summon a huge fusion monster that is unaffected by anything, pretty much, and then you just beat them and you win. So don't be intimidated by the free fortresses that you see in the deck. I know that some of you, probably a lot of you, might not have free copies because it is paywalled, because it can only be obtained from a structure deck. If you don't pay money, you can only get 1 copy because the structure deck can only be bought once without paying. But the deck is still completely fine with only 1 fortress. Obviously, you want as many as possible because having multiple fortresses, which just means that if your opponent outs one of your fortresses, you can just activate a second one, which is I think that you do pretty much every single time. Most people have an out to a single fortress, but it starts to become a problem for them if you activate a second one or a third one. So what you do when you play this deck is you basically, the flowchart of what you do with this deck is during your turn, when you are trying to OTK, you just activate Fortress, and then if your opponent gets rid of your Fortress, you activate a second Fortress. So you just basically activate Fortresses until one of them lands, and once you have a Fortress on your field, you just do your extremely linear combo of making Statue, and then summoning your big guy, and then searching a fusion, making a copy of Ancient Gear Giant, and then you just beat your opponent and win. So let me kind of explain the ratios of this deck in case you want to know why certain cards are played in the number of copies they are. So 2 copies of Ancient Gear Dark Golem, and the reason is that you need 1 for your first turn and then 1 for your second turn if you go first. So you're going to go through one of them on turn 1, and then your opponent's turn, you let them do their thing, and then your turn comes around again, and then you just summon a second one from the deck again. Technically, I think it's fine if you only play 1, but definitely 2 is recommended, and also a lot of times you want 2 on your field because it's a big guy, so sometimes you just use it to beat your opponent. And some people play 3 copies, but it doesn't really do anything in your hand other than letting you reveal it for your skill. And so 2 is perfectly fine. If you want to play 3 copies, go ahead, but I think you kind of only need 3 copies if you're playing rank 8, which I'm not. I have played rank 8 before, like in older versions of the deck, but I don't really feel like I really need any of the rank 8s that often. I don't really make them that often, so I'd rather just have them for other stuff. And then 1 copy of Ancient Gear Golem, you need to play the original in order to use the effect of Commander. So you need to play at least 1. you really only need one because it doesn't really do anything. It's just there for the effect of Commander. And sometimes you actually want to summon the Golem over the Dark Golem because HDU Dark Golem, even though it treats itself as Ancient Gear Golem, if your opponent flips it face down with Eclipse or negates it with Droplet, both of which can bypass the protection from both Fortress and the Trap, it's no longer a Ancient Gear Golem, so you can't use it for a fusion summon for any of the big fusion monsters, which both of them need the Ancient Gear Golem specifically because of Ancient Gear Fusion and Ancient Gear Duel. So Ancient Gear Golem has the advantage of it is still an Ancient Gear Golem even if it's face down or if it gets negated. So sometimes if you already used the search of Dark Golem and you just need an Ancient Gear Golem for the sake of making a fusion monster, you will just make this guy instead. And also it does piercing, so you can punch your opponent once and then use the trap to fusion summon after you attack one time. Tightroid is searchable, you play this for going first. Ancient Gear Commander and Ancient Gear Tanker and Ancient Gear Statue, all three of these cards basically allow you to do full combo to both search a Tightroid and end on the fusion, plus some amount of searches for follow-up. And that is what you usually do. I'll show you a combo later when I show you the replays, but yeah. So that's why we're playing 3 commanders, because Commander and Statue and Tanker, all 3 of these cards allow you to do the combo. So we're playing, we also kind of need to play a large amount of Ancient Gear names, otherwise you will find out that you actually burn through your deck really quickly. Even though you're playing 25 cards, and usually people play 30, you burn through your deck so quickly that by the time turn 3 is over, you pretty much end on like 4 cards in your deck because you search so many cards. So just having more materials in your deck allows you to have monsters to fusion summon with your Ancient Gear Fusion, which when you use it to fusion summon the Ancient Gear Giant, you use 3 cards from your deck. So usually it's going to be multiple copies of Commander because it doesn't really do anything, unlike the other Ancient Gear monsters that you have. We're only playing 1 Wyvern because that's what you search with your skill usually, and this pretty much either gets you combo or gets you Fortress, so it's really good. If you have another way into combo, you're going to use it to search Fortress and then do your combo. And also it's a level 4, so next you use it as material for Gigant X and then search Kitevoid. Statue is your main starter, you use it to get your Dark Golem, and then that's insane. And then 3 copies of Tanker. This is both a starter when you go first, and also a way to kind of get stuff back from your graveyard. And also it pops a card on your field, which is actually really useful, because sometimes you run into a situation where you have like an advance on your field and it doesn't really do anything, it's stuck on your field, and you need zones so that you can maybe activate a fusion from your hand, because your other zones are clogged by Fortress and Duel. So you can just use the Tanker to just get rid of the advance, and then you have a space now to activate your spells. And also it also pops stuff like Fortress or Gear Town, so that you can trigger their effects when they're popped, and then you just summon a guy for free. And also the attack boost is actually pretty useful because it allows you to pretty much beat over the biggest monsters that are running around. So it doesn't boost Ancient Gear Giant, but it does boost Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, which gets it up to 5k. So 5k attack pretty much beats over anything, even crashes with Dragon Master Knight. So that's more attack than you will ever need. But sometimes you do need that attack. 3 Ancient Gear Advance just gets you either combo or more ways to search Fortress. So some people play less than 3 copies. I like playing as many copies as I could just because it gets you Fortress, and Fortress is insane. And 1 copy of Catapult, this is part of your turn 1 combo. Also, it has a pretty good graveyard effect to pop your Gear Towns or Fortresses, and then it gets you a free summon. Speaking of Gear Town, 1 copy of Gear Town, searchable from your Link 2, so you don't need to play more than 1. And then 2 Ancient Gear Fusion. Reason of that is because one is for turn 1, one's for turn 3. The first one you use to make Howitzer if you go first. Second one you go and make the Ancient Gear Giant for OTK. 3 Fortress, just play as many as you could. Even if you don't have 3 copies, just play 2, play 1. Just the more Fortresses you play, the better the deck becomes. And then finally 1 copy of Ancient Gear Jewel. So this is searchable with your skill. It's also protection. Also the reason why you don't need more than 1 fortress if you only have 1 is because Ancient Gear Jewel also gives you protection. It's a different kind of protection, but it's still protection, and it's pretty good. And sometimes you do need that protection because it protects you from stuff like Nib and stuff that doesn't target that your opponent has on the field. Maybe some there are like monsters like spheres that doesn't target or destroy, and this card protects your monsters from those as well. So pretty good form of protection. And then yeah, that's pretty much all I'm playing. I'm not playing more than 25 because I really want to see Fortress, because Fortress is so good. It's so good. And some people play more. They play like 30 cards and then they play some non-engine. You might be able to notice that my entire deck is all engine and I guess Kiteroid. But so my deck philosophy when I'm building this deck is that instead of playing like generic staples that I probably won't see very often because I'm playing such a big deck, I'd rather maximize the chances of me seeing Fortress, which might not win against some decks that have an out to Fortress, but it's consistent enough that I'm willing to take the... It's a price that I'm willing to pay, that sometimes Fortress is not enough, but usually Fortress is enough to win against pretty much 99% of decks in Ranked, and the like 1% of people who know how to play around Fortress or have a deck that just ignores Fortress, those I just accept the loss and then just move on. So yeah, that's why I'm playing 25 and not playing any staples, because Fortress is just a very good card. If you don't have more than 1 copy of Fortress, you might want to replace them with generic stuff like Droplet. Extra deck, 1 Ancient Gear Golem, 1 Ancient Gear Giant, 1 Howitzer. That's pretty straightforward. That's for OTKing. That's also for OTKing. The difference is that this can only attack monsters multiple times. This can attack directly. And also this stops monster effects on the battle phase. This locks spell trap effects when it's attacking. And also sometimes you just need both, because your opponent might be able to out one of them and then you just make a second one. Howitzer is your main turn 1 play, it burns, nobody cares about the burn, but it's very hard to out. It's unaffected by anything. The main way people will out this is they either have a negate, so like something like Borrowload Savage, which negates activation so that it can negate the graveyard effect in damage step, so that it cannot float and then they can just attack over your stuff. Or they have something like a Dweller, and then Dweller just stops it from activating from the graveyard. Or, very, very rarely, they have like a Kaiju, or something like the Sky Striker Ham, and then just shoot it over this card. But usually, people can't out this card very easily. And even if they do, you still have a Kiteroid in your hand, so... very, very, very difficult for 99.9% of decks to actually OTK through both a Howitzer and a Kiteroid in your hand. For some generic stuff, we're playing Tornado Dragon and Yukiken X. Yukiken X is part of your combo, but Tornado Dragon is there to pop back row. Sometimes, against some matchups, you really need the back row to be gone. And issue with Nightmare Phoenix, even though I'm also playing Phoenix, is that it's triggered on summon. So if you're playing something against something like Despia, and then you really want to force out Branded in Red, because if they use Branded in Red, they get to board wipe your stuff, and you really want to prevent that. If you make Phoenix, they can just negate it with Dramaturge, because you go Channeling 1 on summon, and then they go Channeling 2, because you're a turn player, so you have Channeling 1. But with Tornado Dragon, you can make Tornado Dragon, and then you can just not use the effect yet, and then if they try to negate with Dramaturge, you just chain Tornado Dragon and then pop the back row. If they don't use Dramaturge, you just wait until a new chain and then you just use Tornado Dragon. So no matter what, you always force a back row with Tornado Dragon against decks like Despia, and that's why we play Tornado Dragon. And sometimes you just want more back row removal, so you might use both Tornado Dragon and Phoenix. But to be honest, both of those aren't used very often because usually you just win with the Ancient Gear cards themselves. But it's nice to have as some of your flex options that you have in your extra deck. Speaking of flex options, we were playing one copy of Underworld Goddess to out some really annoying things, because some monsters are just really hard to out. Sometimes they have a lot of attack, or maybe they have some form of protection that prevents them from being destroyed, so that you can't really like beat over them with your fusions, and then you can't, even if you lower their attack with Ancient Gear Ballista, you still can't get rid of them. And in that scenario, Underworld Goddess is really good. It just gets rid of anything. And finally, 2 copies of Ballista. Technically 1 is fine, but sometimes you want 2, because even if you're not using it like across 2 turns, if you're not like going first and then use 1 in your turn 1 and then 1 in your next turn, you sometimes actually do make 2 copies of this card if your opponent negates the first one. Sometimes you don't have Fortress, and then you will have to force your opponent to use their interactions by making an early Ballista, and then maybe you make your first Ballista, your opponent negates it, and then you can just link a second Ballista using the first Ballista, and then use the second effect because you haven't used the second effect yet. So in situations like these, you do need 2 copies. And also the extra deck is just so loose anyway that I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to play 2 copies. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess I should explain the skill pretty quickly, even though the skill isn't really like a big part of why this deck is good. It helps, definitely it helps the deck be more consistent, but the strength of this deck is pretty much the Fortress, making all of your stuff unaffected, and then you can just kind of ignore what your opponent is playing and then just spam Fortress and then attack for game. So the skill pretty much searches anything by revealing a card that mentions Ancient Gear Golem, and then if your opponent activated an effect during your turn, you can just activate a face-up Ancient Gear Jewel from your deck, and then you can normal summon a second time. So even if your opponent hand traps you with a Veiler on your turn 1, you can just normal summon the Wyvern with your second normal summon, and then you can still do your combo. So yeah, with that said, let's actually have a look at some replays that I got. Okay, first game we were playing against Dark Magician. I have no idea what this deck does, but doesn't matter because we're playing Ancient Gear, and our deck doesn't care what our opponent is playing. We do the exact same thing every single time. So here's a turn 1 combo. We reveal a card, grab Wyvern, and then we normal summon Tanker or Commander depending on what you have in your hand, and then you summon your Wyvern, add a copy of Ancient Gear Advance, make a Gear Gigant X, search a Kiteroid, activate your Advance, grab your Catapult, and then you tribute your Gigant X to draw a card, and then you can now pop your Advance to grab Ancient Gear Dark Golem, and then you search a Fusion plus any other thing that you don't have, and then you just have that for follow-up, and then you can just Fusion summon a copy of Howitzer, burn your opponent, and then just pass turn. So this is the ideal hand, right? The ideal hand is the Howitzer on field, 1 Kiteroid in hand, and then Statue, Fortress, Fortress. And you actually get to kind of shape, you can mold your hand to look exactly the same a lot because of your searches with Ancient Gear Dark Golem. Because, for example, if I drew Advance, I can just search a Fortress instead of searching Fusion. Or if I have Fusion, I can maybe search another card. Basically, if I have any of the pieces that I am going to search across my turn 1 already in my hand, I can use those searches to search a Fortress instead. And these Fortresses will basically be our follow-up that allows us to play through our opponent's board. Because remember, we don't have any interruptions, so the only thing that we have against our opponent's fully established board, uninterrupted established board, is our fortresses. So grabbing as many fortresses as we could is really important to make sure that we could play through our opponent's full board. So our opponent will try to do their combo. I don't think they can really do anything to get rid of our guy, so we're just gonna let them do their thing, not like we can do anything anyway. And I feel like this is a good time to mention that if you like this type of content of me pretty much going through a deck and then just explaining a deck that I've played, not necessarily a free-to-play deck. This deck is definitely not free-to-play because of the fortresses, but yeah, if you like me basically just explaining a deck, doesn't necessarily have to be a good deck, it can be a bad deck, and then just like talking through the deck like this, and then explaining how to play the deck, or like why you should play the deck, just let me know. And I like doing these types of contents once in a while, other than like the free-to-play deck breakdowns. Okay, so I'll put it end on a Axel Synchro Stardust Dragon, and then just gonna pass turn because they can't beat over my guy anyway. Like, they can beat over it, but it will just trigger the flourish effect, so they will not even do that. They're gonna now Synchro Summon a Wolfra Yet that is unaffected by anything because they made it using Axel Synchro Stardust Dragon. And then, yeah, I activate Fortress. They're gonna pop the Fortress because if my Fortress resolves, he pretty much cannot interact with anything, so he has to pop the Fortress as soon as I activate it. And then, when the Fortress is popped, I just get to summon back the Wyvern from my graveyard, and then search another Fortress, and then activate the second Fortress, which he can't out yet, so let's make a Ballista, and then try to reduce his attack to 0 so that we can actually beat over it. Because 5k attack is quite a lot, we can't really beat over it that easily. The best we can do is crash, so we will have to lower its attack to 0. And then he's gonna use a Dark Magic Expanded, which doesn't really do anything. It's normally really scary against a lot of decks because it makes their guy unaffected. But we don't care if their guy is unaffected or not, because we're just gonna beat over their things. They have a second Dark Magic Expanded, and then they kind of fumble a bit, they tribute their own guy. It doesn't really matter because we can just beat over the Dragon Master Knight anyway. He gets to spin our guy back because our guy is not immune to monster effects, because that guy, the Wolfra Yet doesn't target, doesn't destroy. But we still have our second normal summon, so we can just normal summon, and then we just summon back the Golem, and then we can just fusion summon the ultimate HQ Golem, and then go for game. So he knows that, and he's just gonna scoop, because he has nothing left. Okay, second replay, we're playing against Valence, and I do know what Valence cards do, but because there's so many ways to play Valence, I might as well not know what he's gonna do anyway, so... regardless, as I said, this is a deck for babies, it's 0 brain cells required, so we're just gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna make it the exact same board as we did, and we're just gonna sit and chill and see what our opponent is doing. So I'm gonna add a copy of Kiteroid again, advance to grab a copy of Catapult, tribute so that we can actually activate the Catapult, because if we have a monster, we cannot activate Catapult. And then we can search a copy of Fortress and advance it and just discard the advance because we already have a fusion in hand. And then Howitzer, and then end turn. As you can see, we ended on the exact same board and the exact same hand as last game. It's Statue, Fortress, Fortress, Kiteroid, and Howitzer. So because of the amount of searches this deck has, it's super consistent to not only get the same end board, but get the exact same hand, as you can see right now. So the ideal hand is not only to have as many fortresses as possible, but also have a statue or a tanker, because you want at least one Ancient Gear monster in your hand for you to reveal with your skill so that you can grab anything that you need during your next turn. Because if you only have fortresses, you don't actually have follow-up. You only have protection, but you can't play the game. So you need just at least one monster, ideally statue, because this grabs you anything, plus any amount of fortresses that you have access to. So our opponent is playing kind of a weird version of Valence. They're playing DD Orthros, I'm not sure why. I think it's only because it's a level 4 tuner, but if it's a level 4 tuner, why not play Magic Calibra? I have no idea, but they're gonna make Savage, which negates the Graveyard effect of Hauser, so that I can't float. But that's fine. Even if I can't float, I can still not die because I have Kite Rod in my hand. I'm gonna take a lot of damage because all of his guys are really big, but importantly, I'm not dead. So let's see what our opponent can do against Fortress. So we're gonna activate Fortress. He's gonna pop it. Pretty straightforward. We can bring back our Wyvern, so another Fortress, and then we can activate our second Fortress. Our opponent will activate Arctos to pop it. That's okay. And then we can just trigger the Fortress again because it's popped by our opponent. And then we can just bring back a tanker. We will not use the effect because we kind of don't want to use the one special effect yet. And then we activate our third Fortress. He negates with Savage. And then that's still not over because we have our skill, which places Jewel on our field. And then Jewel still makes our monsters unaffected by his monster effect. So if he tries to put back any of our monsters with Mamo Naka, it doesn't work because we're still protected by Jewel. And then we're going to use Tanker to pop our Gear Town, bring back a copy of HQ Dark Golem. He's going to try to negate, doesn't work because our guy is unaffected by spell trap effects. So we're just going to punch and then we win. It's so simple. Doesn't really matter what our opponent is playing. Doesn't matter how they sequence their interruptions. That's their problem. They have to figure that out themselves. All we do is activate Fortress and win the game. Okay, so this is the final replay that I have. It is also the Rankup match from Legend 5 to King of Games. Our opponent is playing Eldlich. Pretty interesting. Again, not sure what his deck does. And also, again, Eldlich is a deck that you can build in a lot of different ways. So even if you know that they're playing Eldlich, you kind of still don't really know what their deck can do. Doesn't matter, we're still gonna do the exact same thing as we did. So we're gonna go and grab, this time we're gonna grab a statue because we already have Kite Rod in our hand. But the rest of the combo is exactly the same. Let's just fast forward because it's exactly the same. We're gonna grab Fusion and Fortress. So unfortunately this time, because we drew too many bricks, we can't get 2 fortresses, but we still have 1 statue and 1 fortress, so that's still pretty good. So our opponent was going to just do their thing. Zombie World is actually pretty interesting because it actually hurts our deck more than you might think. So even though most of our things don't really care about typing, because all of our monsters only care about if the monster mentions Ancient Gear Golem, we can still pretty much do our entire combo, except for the fact that our skill locks us into Earth Machines. Which means that because all of our monsters in the graveyard are now zombie type, we are pretty much under Necro Valley, basically, because we can't summon monsters that are not Earth Machine. And our monsters in the graveyard are zombies. So that's something that you have to remember when you play against Zombie World, but other than that, we can still pretty much do our entire combo. And if things get too rough, we can always just pop the Zombie World with extra deck monsters, so no big deal. You're still going to activate a copy of Fortress. And while we have the Fortress on our field, our opponent pretty much won't be able to use the Baylor Rock effect because he can't respond to any of our monster activations. So we're just going to do that. We're going to summon a copy of Ancient Gear Golem because we only have Ancient Gear Golem left in our deck. The other 2 Dark Golems are in the graveyard, which we can't summon. So we're just going to activate the Fusion in our hand and then just punch, and then we win. So yeah, pretty simple deck, really straightforward. If you want to cog with 0 brain cells, this is the deck for you. Even if you don't have money to buy the structure deck to get more copies of Fortress, that's fine. The deck still works, and I hope this kind of gives you an idea of what this deck does. If you have spare gems, or you want to build a new deck, or if you just really want to get to King of Games, or just climb ranks in general without needing to think too much, this is a deck for you. So yeah, okay, that's pretty much it. Bye.